Okay, the last video goes over the 4 most common billing codes that you would include in your documentation. Now, hopefully you're at a facility where you don't have to worry about this. I was at one that this was determined after a review of your daily documentation. Another person coded and billed everything. But then I was at one facility where we had to do the billing ourselves. So the 4 most common that OTs use are therapeutic activity, therapeutic exercise, neuromuscular reeducation, and self-care. And how you kind of choose to use those codes varies behind the intent and the purpose of your interventions and your session. But what I found is sometimes people labeled their billing a certain way, but if you read the note, it looks like it should have been labeled something completely different. So you need to make sure you make that clear in your documentation of how you document your daily treatment note that aligns with whatever you chose to bill. They need to be congruent. Therapeutic exercise should be really focusing on those exercise programs. If you worked on strengthening anything specifically, therapeutic activity is any of those simulated ADL tasks, working on activity tolerance and endurance, incorporating safety into task, energy conservation into task, and like doing things differently. Neuromuscular reeducation to me is like a building block component, and so it may at times look like that could have been a self-care or a therapeutic activity, but it's kind of like a precursory thing, especially if you're giving a lot of cues, using a lot of biofeedback, doing a lot of muscle tapping, quick tendon reflex, incorporating cognition into task. All of those things may be appropriately billed neuromuscular reeducation. You'll use this a lot with traumatic brain injuries and your CVA populations. And then self-care is all of those activities of daily living that we do, and being able to do that. And then this is just where you have to like be mindful of were you doing self-care, because this is where sometimes people are like, well, I was working on their endurance, and so I built it under therapeutic activity because I was doing these self-care tasks to do this, like this was the purpose behind it, or I was trying to do an entire ADL routine so that I could work on their endurance. And so as long as you're clear behind the purpose and the intent, I think that is what anybody is asking and looking for with how you document. So sometimes it's acceptable and something could go under one or more categories. It's just making sure that your documentation aligns with justifying why you build the way that you did. And so those are just some little things to take into consideration. But I would also challenge you. So a lot of therapeutic exercise happening at my site is really try to maintain being function-based. And so if you're function-based as a therapist, I think you'll see yourself using therapeutic activity, self-care, and neuromuscular reeducation more in your practice than you would therapeutic exercise. I do think therapeutic exercise has its time and its place, but it should be a support and not something that you overly rely on and that every session has in it. So I just really would challenge you to rely on other billing codes and not just fall back on therapeutic exercise because it's the easy thing to do, or it's what everybody does at your facility. Try to be an evidence-based and a current trend practitioner when you go out into the field. So I hope these videos provide you with a great foundation for starting your trend and your journey into documentation. Thank you.